You don't belong here, Wheels. The words sliced through Miller's Crossroads diner like broken glass, cruel and sharp enough to make every conversation stop mid-sentence. Three men in worn leather jackets stood blocking the entrance, their laughter echoing off the cracked walls as the biggest one shoved my wheelchair backward. Not violent, just enough to send me rolling into the corner booth where a family was trying to eat their pancakes in peace. Plates crashed. Orange juice splattered across linoleum that had seen better decades. I didn't cry out. Didn't give them the satisfaction. But across the room, a young man by the grease-stained window was watching everything unfold, and beside him sat someone whose jaw was tightening with each passing second. 27 minutes later, a forest green pickup truck pulled up outside. Four Marines climbed out, their boots hitting pavement with purpose, and suddenly the entire diner went dead quiet. If you believe dignity shouldn't be determined by what uniform you wear or how you walk, drop honor in the comments and hit subscribe for more stories about the courage that lives in unexpected places. My name is Maria Santos, and I've been working the evening shift at Miller's Crossroads for 8 months now. Corner table, same spot every night, right under the neon sign that flickers between open and ope depending on the weather. This place serves coffee that could strip paint and pie that tastes like heaven wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. The kind of establishment where the red vinyl seats have stories to tell and the jukebox only plays songs from 1987. I love every stubborn, imperfect inch of it. The manager, Eddie, gives me the quiet hours, 4 to 9, when the dinner crowd thins out and the chaos settles into something manageable. I roll napkins around silverware with the same precision I once used to field strip an M16 in complete darkness. Muscle memory runs deep when you've spent 3 deployments in the mountains of Afghanistan, and some habits never fade, even after an IED takes half your mobility and most of your faith in easy answers. I'm 42 now, former Sergeant First Class, and this wheelchair has become more familiar than the prosthetic gathering dust in my closet. The wheels squeak when I turn sharp corners, but there's something honest about that sound. No pretending, no hiding what happened. My hands still know their way around precision work, though these days it's folding napkins instead of handling weapons. The routine keeps me grounded. Roll, crease, stack, repeat. On good days, that steady rhythm is enough to quiet the noise in my head. Most customers here treat me like part of the furniture. Polite nods, careful smiles, the occasional thank you that sounds rehearsed. Some can't meet my eyes, as if my missing leg might be contagious. I don't take it personally. People see what they want to see, and sometimes that's easier than acknowledging what they don't understand. In my jacket pocket, I carry a photo that's been folded and unfolded so many times the edges have gone soft. It shows me and my squad before everything changed. 12 faces grinning at the camera like we owned the world. My smile in that picture is wider than any I've managed since coming home. I haven't looked at it in weeks, but something tells me today might be different. Today feels like the kind of day that strips away the careful walls you build around yourself. The front door exploded inward like a gunshot, rattling every dish on every table. 3 men swagger through, heavy boots, thick necks, leather vests decorated with patches that read Diesel, Wrench, and Spike. Their laughter hit the room like a physical force, the kind designed to claim territory and dare anyone to challenge it. I kept my hands steady, continued my work, but felt the familiar tightness in my chest that comes when trouble announces itself. Diesel was clearly the alpha. Broad chest, sunburned arms, teeth that showed too much when he grinned. His eyes found me immediately, like a predator spotting wounded prey. Well, he drawled, elbowing his companions. Looks like the charity case got herself a job. Wrench snorted. Bet the tips are good when you're playing the hero card. I didn't react. Couldn't afford to. In combat zones, you learn that words are just noise until someone makes them into action. But here in this small-town diner where people preferred looking away to stepping up, insults carried a different kind of weight. Spike dropped himself onto a stool at the counter, slapping the service bell hard enough to make it ring like an alarm. We gonna get some service here or just watch the sideshow? I wheeled myself over, spine straight, shoulders squared. What can I get you gentlemen today? My voice came out level, professional, giving them nothing to grab onto. But I could feel something building in the air. Thick and dangerous as storm clouds. And across the room, that young man by the window was still watching. his father's hand now gripping his coffee cup tight enough to crack the handle. "Sure thing, hero," Diesel drawled, his voice pitched loud enough to reach every corner of the diner. "Wheel it on over here." The words dripped with mockery, each syllable designed to humiliate. Wrench joined in, leaning back in his chair. "Bet they don't let people like you handle real food back at those government kitchens, do they?" A young couple at the corner table shifted uncomfortably, then went completely still. The evening waitress, Janet, glanced up from the register before quickly busying herself with cleaning the same coffee pot for the third time. Nobody was going to get involved. That much was crystal clear. I kept my expression neutral, placing their menus down with deliberate care, each one positioned exactly where it belonged. My movements stayed controlled, professional, even as Diesel continued his performance. "Thought they had special places for people like you," he muttered just loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Some kind of separate dining situation." I rolled away from their table without a word. Behind me, someone snickered. Spike stretched his legs out wide, claiming more territory than any normal person needed, blocking the narrow walkway between tables. "Maybe she's here for training," he announced to his buddies. "Learning how to take orders from real Americans." The first fracture had appeared in my carefully maintained calm. The second one was racing toward me like a freight train. I made my way to the coffee station, hands steady despite the tremor I felt starting in my chest. My wheelchair bumped gently against the worn counter as I reached for a fresh pot, focusing on the familiar weight of ceramic, the routine of pouring. Behind me, their laughter swelled again, feeding off its own cruelty. "You know what really gets me?" Diesel called out, his voice carrying across the entire restaurant. "They started putting women in combat zones like it was some kind of game. Probably slowed down every real soldier around them." Wrench nodded enthusiastically. "Bet she spent the whole war behind some desk, typing up reports and calling herself a warrior." I didn't turn around. Didn't need to. The next moment was already writing itself, and I could feel it coming like the whistle of incoming artillery. Spike pushed back from his stool and started walking toward me, moving with the confident swagger of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Hey, soldier girl," he slurred, though I hadn't seen him drink anything stronger than black coffee. "You going deaf on us? We're trying to have a conversation here." I glanced over my shoulder, not in fear, but in assessment. Spike was bigger than me, sure, but sloppy in the way that comes from assuming strength equals victory, the kind of threat you avoid engaging unless absolutely forced to. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell stale cigarettes and cheap cologne. Then, without warning, without permission, his hands clamped down on the handles of my wheelchair. Time slowed the way it does right before an explosion. He yanked the chair forward with a vicious jerk, no finesse, all brutality. My front wheel caught the leg of a nearby table. The coffee tray flew from my lap like shrapnel. Scalding liquid splashed across my forearm, and I heard the sharp ping of silverware hitting linoleum. Then came the sound I hadn't heard since that day in the mountains outside Kabul. My own body hitting the ground. Hard. My right shoulder took the impact first. Then my hip twisted as I fell sideways. The wheelchair toppled with me, metal clanging against tile. Pain shot through my ribs as the armrest pressed into my side. Coffee soaked through my work shirt, burning against skin that had already known too much fire. Miller's Crossroads. Diner went absolutely silent. A busboy near the kitchen entrance froze with a tub of dirty dishes halfway to his chest. Janet dropped her cleaning rag and gasped, but her feet stayed planted behind the register. The couple by the window stared down at their pie like it held the secrets of the universe. The young man who'd been watching everything happen half rose from his seat, but his father's hand shot out and pulled him back down. No one stood up. No one said a word. No one moved. Diesel, Wrench, and Spike laughed. Not the loud, attention-seeking laughter from before, but something quieter, meaner, satisfied. The sound of predators who'd successfully cornered their prey. I lay there on the sticky tile floor, coffee seeping into my jeans, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. My wallet had spilled from my jacket pocket, and from it slipped that folded photograph I'd been carrying for 3 years. The one of my squad standing proud in the Afghan sun, 12 faces grinning like we owned the world. Someone had written on the back in black permanent marker, Santos carried us through everything. I didn't cry. Wouldn't give them that satisfaction. But the silence in that diner had never felt heavier, and for the first time since coming home, I wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe places like this really weren't made for people like me. I pushed myself up slowly, not because I couldn't move faster, but because dignity demanded precision. My hands found their rhythm, movements trained by years of getting back up when the world knocked you down. My breathing stayed controlled, jaw set, even as coffee dripped from my sleeves. Nobody offered to help. The laughter had died to smug whispers now, the three men lounging in their chairs like kings surveying conquered territory. Diesel muttered something about welfare queens under his breath, but even his buddies didn't respond. I reached for my wheelchair, righted it with one smooth motion, and transferred back into it like I'd done 1,000 times before in 1,000 different circumstances. My work shirt clung to my skin, soaked through with coffee and humiliation. My Marine Corps pin caught the overhead light, still gleaming despite everything. A wadded napkin rolled past my wheel, but I didn't bother reaching for it. Near the front window, a kid maybe 10 years old sat frozen in his booth, eyes wide as dinner plates. He hadn't blinked in what felt like minutes. "Dad," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Is that lady a soldier?" His father turned to look. A man somewhere in his 50s wearing a faded baseball cap, his jacket decorated with old military patches. I caught a glimpse of the embroidery. Operation Iraqi Freedom, 1st Marine Division. He didn't answer his son immediately. Instead, he studied me. My steady hands, my clenched jaw, my coffee-stained uniform, and the photograph still visible on the floor beside my chair. The one with "Santos carried us through everything," written in black ink on the back. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, Connor. She's the real deal." Then he stood up, calm as morning coffee, walked toward the exit, and pulled out his phone. Outside, the afternoon light had turned golden, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The town settled into its evening quiet, the kind of peaceful lull that makes you forget the world has sharp edges. The man stood beside his weathered pickup truck and raised the phone to his ear. "This is Staff Sergeant Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying just enough through the window for me to catch pieces. "I need to report an incident. No, not official business, civilian situation, but it involves family." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "You're going to want to send a response team. Trust me on this one." Inside, I sat motionless at my corner table, smoothing down the wet fabric of my flannel shirt. My hands moved across my lap like I was brushing away invisible debris, but they paused at my chest just long enough to press against my heart, feeling it beat steady and strong. I had no idea they were already coming. 35 minutes crawled by like hours. The three men had grown bolder, more comfortable, acting like nothing had happened. Diesel waved his empty cup for a refill. Wrench played with the sugar packet, tearing it into tiny pieces. Spike had his boots propped up on the adjacent chair, his laughter echoing through the diner whenever someone dared glance in his direction. I stayed in my corner, silent as stone. I didn't serve anyone else. Didn't speak. My posture remained straight, hands folded like I was bracing against a storm only I could feel. The photograph had been tucked safely back in my wallet, but my uniform still carried the evidence of their cruelty. Then I heard it. The deep rumble of tires on gravel. Not the sound of a regular car or pickup truck. Something heavier, more purposeful. Outside Miller's Crossroads Diner, a forest green pickup rolled to a stop, dust swirling around its massive tires. Marine Corps emblems gleamed on both doors. It parked directly in front of the entrance, engine idling with quiet authority that somehow filled the entire space. Inside, every conversation died mid-sentence. The front door opened with military precision. 4 Marines stepped through like they owned not just the building, but the ground it sat on. They didn't announce themselves. Didn't need to. The first was a master sergeant, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, walking with the slight favor of someone who'd left pieces of himself on foreign soil. His eyes swept the room like he was clearing a perimeter. Behind him came a younger Marine, tall and sharp-edged, wheeling a spotless wheelchair. The third was a female major, her dress blues decorated with ribbons that told stories of places most people only see on the news. Her presence alone changed the atmosphere. The silence grew thicker, more electric. Even Janet stopped pretending to clean, her dish rag suspended mid-wipe. The three troublemakers went statue still. Wrench dropped his sugar packet. Diesel blinked like he was trying to wake up from a confusing dream. I didn't move until the master sergeant stopped directly in front of my table. He straightened to full attention despite his obvious injury and delivered a crisp, textbook salute. "Sergeant First Class Santos," he said, his voice like gravel and steel forged together. "Sorry we're late to the party." My body responded before my brain caught up. I returned his salute, sharp and precise, and for the first time in months, something ignited behind my eyes. Not fear or shame, but something that had been buried under too much silence. Recognition, respect, family. The entire diner held its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody dared. The four Marines stood like monuments, uniforms pristine, boots polished to mirror shine. The kind of presence that didn't request attention. It commanded it without saying a word. The female major stepped forward, her gaze locked on mine. When she spoke, her voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd never had to raise it to be heard. "We received a call from family." He reported that a decorated Marine was being publicly harassed on civilian ground. She let her eyes move slowly, deliberately, until they settled on the corner table where Diesel, Wrench, and Spike sat frozen like deer in headlights. The smugness had vanished completely. Diesel's jaw worked silently. Wrench stared at his hands. Spike shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how loud and cruel he'd been just minutes before. The major's voice remained perfectly level. The report also mentioned physical assault. I shook my head quickly. "It's really nothing," I said, but the words came out weak, unconvincing. The master sergeant didn't flinch. "With all due respect, Sergeant First Class, it is absolutely something," he replied, his voice carrying to every corner of the diner. "Nobody puts hands on family. Not in theater, not stateside, not ever." The younger Marine stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the three troublemakers. "Sergeant First Class Santos led our convoy through the Khyber Pass. She pulled 4 soldiers out of a burning Humvee after we hit an IED. I was one of those soldiers." I looked up at him, recognition flooding through me. "Private Rodriguez," I whispered. "Staff Sergeant now, ma'am." He nodded with a slight smile. "Thanks to your example." Then something beautiful started happening. From across the room came the sound of a chair scraping against linoleum. Connor, the boy who'd been watching everything unfold, stood up slowly. His father, Staff Sergeant Mitchell, rose beside him. A subtle nod passed between them. Then, near the kitchen, an elderly man wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap pushed himself to his feet. No words, just a quiet, dignified salute. A woman by the door followed suit. 2 men in civilian clothes, National Guard weekend warriors, I could tell by their bearing, stood at attention. Within moments, half the diner was on their feet, backs straight, shoulders squared, forming a wall of silent, unshakable solidarity. Wrench sank deeper into his booth. Diesel looked away like the fluorescent lights had suddenly become too bright. Even Spike couldn't find his voice. For the first time since walking into Miller's Crossroads 8 months ago, I owned the room. Not through intimidation or cruelty, but through something far more powerful. Respect earned through service, honored by those who understood its weight. 10 days later, everything had changed. The old weathered sign outside was gone, replaced by a hand-carved wooden board painted in deep navy blue. Hometown Heroes Cafe, where every service member is family. Inside, the transformation was subtle but unmistakable. The far wall now displayed a gallery of local veterans' photographs. Service portraits, deployment shots, reunion pictures. Some showed young faces in crisp dress blues, others weathered features in desert camouflage, all of them looking forward with the quiet dignity that comes from having served something larger than yourself. The booth where Diesel and his crew had sat that day remained empty. Not because anyone banned them, but because somehow, nobody wanted to claim that space. It felt wrong, tainted. I still came in for my evening shifts, still rolled silverware with the same methodical precision. But now my Marine Corps pin sat prominently on my collar, catching the light like a small beacon. A miniature American flag patch was attached to the back of my wheelchair, faded from years of wear but flying proud. Customers approached me now, some offering quiet thanks, others simply nodding with the kind of recognition that doesn't need words. Eddie had mounted a small plaque above my usual table, reserved for those who answered the call. All gave some gave all. The manager himself had transformed too. Gone were the stained aprons and wrinkled shirts. Now he wore pressed uniforms with a small flag pin on his collar. That week, he hired 2 more veterans, Marcus for the kitchen, Army, 3 tours in Iraq, and Linda for weekend shifts, Navy corpsman who'd served on hospital ships. Janet, the evening waitress, started asking me about military ranks during slow periods. She could now spot the difference between enlisted stripes and officer bars from across the room. More importantly, she'd learned which stories veterans wanted to share and which ones they needed to keep private. Lessons I taught her gently, over coffee and quiet conversation. The Marines kept their word. Every Thursday at exactly 6 p.m., that forest green pickup pulled into the lot. Master Sergeant Wilson, Major Rodriguez, Staff Sergeant Mitchell, Connor's dad had joined their informal unit. They'd sit at my table without ceremony, sharing coffee and comfortable silence and memories that didn't need explaining. What had begun as a moment of cruelty had grown into something larger. A restaurant reborn, a community reminded of its values, a woman no longer invisible in her own hometown. I didn't smile often, but when I did, like when Rodriguez told some half-true story about our convoy getting lost in the mountains, it reached all the way to my eyes for the first time in years. One evening, as the Colorado sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, the door opened again. A young woman stepped inside, barely 19, stiff in a brand new Air Force uniform. Her cap was clutched in both hands, her eyes wide with uncertainty. She stood in the doorway like she wasn't sure she belonged anywhere. I noticed her immediately. Rolling forward without hesitation, my flag patch catching the warm light streaming through the windows. "First deployment?" I asked gently. She nodded. "Flying out tomorrow morning, Sergeant." I gestured to the empty chair at my table. "Sit. Coffee's not terrible and the company's even better." She hesitated. I wouldn't want to impose. "You're not imposing, Airman," I said with the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. "You're carrying on a tradition." As she settled in, Master Sergeant Wilson raised his coffee mug. No speeches, just a silent acknowledgement. Around the cafe, other veterans lifted their cups, some with hands that trembled slightly from old wounds, others with postures still parade ground sharp after decades of civilian life. Nobody spoke. We didn't need to. The message was crystal clear. You are seen. You are family. You'll never face anything alone. In the weeks that followed, the entire town seemed to wake up. I was invited to speak at Jefferson High School, where I told students what the uniform really meant. Not war or glory, but discipline, purpose, and carrying others when they couldn't carry themselves. Local businesses started offering veteran discounts without being asked. The town council approved a small memorial for the central square, black granite with simple words carved in silver, "To those who served with honor and those who stand with them." Diesel, Wrench, and Spike never came back. Word around town was that Diesel lost his job after someone posted video of the incident online. Something about company policy and public conduct. I never asked for details. I had more important things to focus on, like the young Marine who came for Sunday coffee, nervous about her first overseas assignment, or the Korean War veteran who finally started wearing his service ribbons again after 50 years of keeping them hidden in a drawer. Outside, that forest green pickup waited in the fading light, a note taped to the windshield that read, "We always return for those who never quit." And inside, surrounded by the gentle sounds of conversation, clinking coffee cups, and chosen family, Maria Santos finally felt like she was home. If you believe no veteran should ever stand alone, drop family in the comments and share this story. Because some battles are won not with weapons, but with the simple act of standing up when it matters most.